Lisa Channer has a unique perspective on the times we live in and what role art, and theater specifically, have to play in this moment. She has lived many years in Minneapolis and marched in protest and solidarity over George Floyd's murder. She found her husband and refined her artistic voice by working in Russia. When a car accident ended her dance career, she found directing in the theater. Hers is a life of these times. When she says that collectivity and community is what humans do, she means it. Her artistic approach is informed by her belief that collaboration is telling the truth about what we can all see, even if we don't like it, and that leadership is not a ladder, but a circle of well-trained experts. Finally, she leaves us with the question, what legacy are we leaving from this time? A question we are collectively answering today. Hello, and welcome to another installment of At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a platform where we will learn from people who come from different walks of life, careers, and experiences, but all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of saying yes to the unexpected turns of their lives, and they are now using the power of their voice or podium to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium is the intersection of art, culture, and big thoughts wrapped up in good, old-fashioned conversation. Today, I'm thrilled and humbled to share the podium with Lisa Channer. Lisa Channer is a director, producer, performer, educator, and mother. She is currently the co-artistic director of Theater Novi Most, a Russian-American-based project in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Previously, she served as the co-artistic director of the Sleeveless Theater, a feminist collective theater company in Massachusetts. In New York, she has directed and performed in works at the Public Theater, WOW, Classical Stage, and the 92nd Street Y. She has directed in regional theaters in Chicago and New England, including Yale Repertory Theater, Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, and the Market Theater in Boston, Massachusetts. She has directed internationally from Amsterdam to Belfast to Russia. She is a Fulbright International Scholar and the recipient of the Fox Foundation Fellowship for Directing. Lisa received her MFA in directing from the Yale School of Drama and a BA in theater arts from the University of Massachusetts. She received additional advanced training at the Del Arte School of Physical Theater in California and the St. Petersburg Academy of Theater Arts in Russia. She currently works as an associate professor of theater arts and dance at the University of Minnesota. Before we hear from Lisa, I want to invite you to share At the Podium with the people in your lives. If you love what you hear from her today, and I know you will, take a screenshot and share on your Instagram and tag @thepodium_Patrick Huey. Or if you're on Facebook, share our link there. Your shares, likes, and 5-star written reviews help grow our audience and move us up the charts. I'm grateful for your help in this capacity. Okay, Lisa, welcome to At the Podium.
What an amazing mission statement. Thank you for that. That was inspiring alone. We could stop now.
I know, we're done. Lisa, I can't believe it's been 21 years.
It went by, yeah.
But I'm so happy that you're here today. You created for me one of the most memorable theatrical moments, experiences in my life. And I don't say that hyperbolically. It was your thesis project at the Yale Repertory Theater of the Misanthrope. Our dear friend Catherine Hahn was in that.
Regina was in that.
Regina, oh, that's right. Regina Bain was in that. And she's also done
our Cineway, and she did your podcast. That's why I wanted to make sure we give her a little shout out because she was unbelievable in that.
Amazing. That entire show talks about the lasting impact that a really amazing theatrical production can have. What I remember about the play, Lisa, was the amazing lighting. I thought the lighting that you were able... Who was the lighting designer on that play?
I think it was Aga. I'm so afraid to say the wrong things now because it's so long ago. I'm not sure if I'm mixing up other shows, but I'm pretty sure it was Aga.
And also remember, the beauty of your work in general is that you have a strong gift for creating a visual narrative and a visual gesture that encapsulates the emotional life of the play that you're directing.
Well,
and I
thank
thought
you.
that the physical gestures that you created were quite spectacular. And the part that I loved the most was that you had the actors yellow out their teeth.
Yeah, and you know what? You said that, and I don't remember that at all, but I'm sure it's true. Georgia Lee was my costume designer. She's doing incredible work all over. We had a reunion not long ago. She was in town directing it, the Guthrie, and we hung out for a bit and caught up. But she did those amazing fabric wigs. I mean, just yeah. And she's a scenic designer, but she did costumes for me.
She yellowed out their teeth so that you have all these incredible wigs, these incredible costumes, this amazing lighting. And every time they would smile or talk, you would see the rotting teeth in their mouth.
Rot of wealth.
The rot of wealth.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And we made a glass house. We made a glass building for them to live in so that you could see everything outside of the building as well as the room they were in. Also, found out I was pregnant on like the first week of rehearsals for that. And Jackson Gay was my assistant director, the amazing Jackson. And I remember leaning over to her. I was very nauseous. And I leaned over to her and I said, I think I'm pregnant. And you can't tell the actors because I don't want them to worry about me. Right. And I hadn't been pregnant before and I was violently ill. So when I look back on photo shoots from that show, I get nauseous. Oh I God. See like that crazy world of excess and disgusting wigs, beautiful costumes and all the rococo layers. And I just get like, because it's sense memory.
I want to talk to you because I haven't had this conversation on At the Podium yet, a real deep dive into theater and what that means. It was such an important part of my life and still is today. And I thought there's no one better to talk to than Lisa Channer because she gets it, I think, in a very specific kind of way. And also you come at it from a directing point of view, from a producing point of view, and not just a performance point of view, which I think is a very interesting way to have a wholesome conversation about it. I understand a person saying they want to be an actor. That's a very visible, clear trajectory for people. When you go to the movies, you see the actors.
Yeah.
Directing is a different set of circumstances. And I want to know, did you always know that you wanted to be a director?
That's such a great question. And I teach directing now. So it's something we talk about a lot with my young aspiring directors, not young, but my aspiring directors. I'll tell you how it happened for me was that I was a dancer first. So I had been a dancer up into my 20s. A wonderfully timed car accident shifted my focus to acting, which I was already doing both of, but I became more of an actor. And then I founded a theater company through 4 other women. We started a sort of feminist company called Sleeveless Theater, where we built everything collectively. And it was a sort of reinvention of vaudeville and sketch comedy into these sort of new political, intellectual forms. And so we were kind of like, we were called National Public Radio meets Monty Python. And we were making plays about the pro-choice movement and about the feminist movement and about the Gulf War. And somewhere along the 8 years of being with Sleeveless, I started thinking more about the whole of a show than about my piece in it. I started getting very obsessed with the collectivity. And I had been a choreographer, I think, so that my bones had this sense of, I used to choreograph the geese in the sky. Part of it was like just selfish control. Like directing is actually saying, I want to see that. It can feel selfish when you're young. So I kind of pushed it away. And also, to be honest, the statistics for women directors were dismal. Something like 13% of regional theater shows were directed by women at that time. And it's only, marginally better now, to be perfectly frank. But then the company started doing some different kinds of work where I stepped forward as director and I found that I just loved it. And then I figured, okay, I'll go to grad school to actually learn how to do this thing that I'm sort of fumbling around trying to do. And my interest was in making new work. The regional theater model didn't interest me, and neither did the canon that I knew. And again, most of the canon was male and white. It was like Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill, Shakespeare, Chekhov, Ibsen. It was all the wonderful playwrights that I totally honor and love, but it was really hard to find myself in there. So I said, well, I'll go to the place that's going to teach me how to love those guys so that I can do it, and learn the craft. And I was accepted to UC San Diego, and Yale. And, Yale was such a mythic, fancy place. I come from humble roots. I came up much more poor in Bohemia. So Yale just seems so hoity-toity and out of my, I don't know. I just didn't imagine it, but it happened. And then I did. That's exactly what I set out to do. Is Yale taught me the craft, and Yale taught me to love the old white guys and figure out how to bust that canon open a little and reinvent it. And you also know, Patrick, I came from a performance background, which was rooted. I had studied out at the Dell'Arte School in clown and physical theater making, right? So I had another vocabulary that I brought to Yale with me that married really well with the kind of classical training that we got there. And then what I got there was the love and magical brilliance of playwrights. I get to work with a lot of playwrights, and I think that they're magicians. I don't know how they read my mind. I don't know how they read the world so well. I'll have like 3 sentences with a playwright about an idea. And then a month later, there's this play that's as if they downloaded a chip from my brain. And when you make new work, you're relying on other people to really hone in with you on something. It's not like it's ready-made and then you interpret it. You're literally the creator from the beginning with them. So you're really putting a lot of trust in the hands of the playwright.
And I think that's part of the brilliance of the program at Yale, and I hope they still do it. I don't know if they do or not, but that playwriting program and that directing program and the collaboration that really happens in the rehearsal hall with the director, the playwright, and the actor on creating new work, I think is the secret sauce of that program. I mean, everywhere studies Chekhov, Ibsen, Shakespeare, Moliere. I mean, and you have to learn the canon. You have to understand how that works, because that's a huge preponderance of our work. Yeah. But I, too, was the most excited about the work that we were doing in those CWPs and in those playwriting workshops.
The new work. Yeah. Your class was wonderful for that.
And we loved it.
And I worked with a lot of your class because of that. I was less interested in the traditions that we've inherited, on whose shoulders we stand.
Yes.
I was more interested in where the form is going. And I find theater very often to be behind the curve on innovation. And it's because it's the mother art. And when you are going to put all the art forms together, it's a slower, huge behemoth to shift. It's harder if you're just working with movement. It's dance. It's one element that you get to really innovate and push, or art or sculpture. With theater, it's intellect, it's words, it's visual, it's scenic, it's sculptural, it's all the things, right? So it's a little slow. And I find that frustrating. I do. I'll be honest. Theater has broken my heart so many times. Not for me personally. I've lived a life 100% actually on my own terms, which means I'm not going to maybe be famous or whatever the words for that are, or traditionally mainstream. But I've been able to make work that really feeds me by making my own company twice and developing work very much in my own way. And I have the support of a university, which means I also don't have to do that freelance hustle in the same way. I freelance, but it's not, I can pick and choose more, right? So it's luxurious. My life in that way artistically has been luxurious in some ways. But this forum, watching it and seeing how it evolves and watching the ways that it treats people, the ways that it treats ideas, it can be heartbreaking sometimes.
Why is it that it is such that experience? And I think people who are actively engaged in the theater would completely understand what you're expressing here, that it's a very slow process. It's very hard to make it feel relevant, which is why I think musicals like Rent and Hamilton have struck a chord, because they dropped into the immediacy of life in the 1990s in Rent. And even though we're talking history in Hamilton, they basically colorized that show.
Well, yeah, and both those shows were speaking much more to the moment they were actually made in than to any kind of historical past, right? They were speaking to a zeitgeist of what people were needing and processing outwardly, and then didn't talk down to it. I think theater often infantilizes both its actors and its audience. It doesn't have to do that. It can be both. We had an amazing experience in 2012. I had moved here to Minneapolis in 2007. And in 2012, the Guthrie, then under different leadership, so I'm not speaking anything dissing the Guthrie, right? Just this is what happened in 2012. They announced a season of 27 or 30 productions, events, things. And I mean, Patrick, it was 100% directed and written by white men. Nothing outside that box. So, of course, it got noticed. Not that it was terribly unusual. There was usually a token person of color directing, or, well, if you're lucky, directing, but, and then a token woman or woman play that got to be directed by a woman. This was this is the norm that we inherited. And the press nationally talked about it. And the leadership at the time got defensive and said it's very difficult to direct on these stages. There's a very slim number of people that can handle it. It was really astonishing, the lack of vision.
Wow.
But and he said, and we have to fill every seat because we are working on a budget that must be successful and get in audiences. But what is astonishing about that whole debate and what it erupted, and it started this journey toward, we see a white American theater, Me Too, all these movements now for diversity, thank God. The next year, the budget was released of how that year had done the all-white male season. They were in the red for the first time in decades, and it was because of that season.
Wow.
That season had put them in debt. And I went, well, let's talk about that you can be popular and all of this stuff and still speak to wide swaths of our lived culture instead of just this narrow range. So it's not true that when you go and have diverse voices talking about alternative ideas that you're going to lose money. In fact, it might be the opposite. So it doesn't have to be an either or.
No, and if you look at the statistics around diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, the financial benefit of that model where you have an inclusive model, it can't be argued.
And when you take money out of it and it's no longer about making money, then the benefits are just incredible, right? So this is where theater sometimes has been behind. I mean, if you think that conversation here in liberal, very progressive, arts-focused Minneapolis, that's only 10 years ago.
Wow.
Now it's a different story and the movements are changing, but that's all. It's just, so it can break my heart sometimes. American theater is kind of made in an assembly line model, right? So it's disposable art. So that's why the regional theater system also breaks my heart sometimes. When I was in Russia working there, I learned about a much more theater as a central, not the entertainment wing of the culture, but the culture making center of it. And I think America, we still think of it as sort of the entertainment wing, unfortunately. I don't think it's everywhere. I just think that in the popular mind, not most people don't go to theater.
You are the co-artistic director of Theater Novi Most, which is a theater in Minneapolis. How did Russia enter your life?
Yeah, that was also Yale. Yale gave me so many things. When we were, I'll just briefly, do you remember, were you there when we did the Meyerhold project, the whole Revizor, Inspector General? Okay.
No.
We did a project after the fall of the Soviet Union. All these documents were available now about this famous production directed by the theater director, Vasily Meyerhold in Russia. Famous director, holy grail really for innovative directing, right? So suddenly people are like opening up special cabinets in their house and finding old scores from theater projects that were hidden away during the Soviet Union era because they were considered dangerous. Right. So the Russian MFA program at the State Academy in St. Petersburg and Yale School of Drama collectively did a project that brought 15 Russian directing MFA students over to act in the show. It brought their teacher, Gennady Tostinetsky, and David Chambers, my teacher, together to co-direct it. And then several of us, we had 7 actors, and then I was assigned just in my first year as assistant director to this project. And I had fallen in love with Meyerhold already and his writings and ideas. So it was amazing. And that's where I met my husband. So one of those 15 directors that came over was Vladimir Rovinsky. We connected right away and started making work together. Even though we couldn't speak each other's language, we were both interested in physical theater techniques and kind of innovation. And so we started making work together, and that led to Novi Most. It was all Yale. David Chambers, we used to say, is our Yenta. He brought us.
David
He brought
Chambers.
us together. Yes.
Will you tell who David Chambers is?
David Chambers at that time was teacher of directing at Yale School of Drama, along with Liz Diamond and Stan Wojewicki in those years, who was the chair of the program. And David became a mentor for me because he brought me to Russia. And because of that project, we went back and forth as students a couple times to Amsterdam and then to Russia, all of us. And the Russians came here. It was there was no internet yet. There was only there was only AOL email. So it wasn't like you could just know. Russia was still a mystery. We were all kind of like, what are they going to be like? So that led me to Russia. So now I have 2 Russian American children, and Volodya and I founded Theater Novimos together.
Beautiful.
It means Theater of a New Bridge in Russian. So it's a project that lets us explore the aesthetics, histories, styles, and cultures of the 2 countries and try to connect them and make sense of that relationship.
What was that like over the past 5 years, given all
crazy? It's been like everybody else, all kind of surreal, right? Aren't we all kind of just like, what happened?
Right.
I've been working the last several years on a project called Denim, which is about America's myths about itself and its origins. And it sort of uses the fabric of denim, the most American of all uniforms, jeans, to tell the story of America's ideas about itself. So that's been my sprawling. And I think the reason I can do that is because I've been able to see America from the outside by being connected with another country.
Right.
So I'm interested in understanding how we got where we are. But, it's crazy, Patrick. And I don't know if theater's the form to, I don't know. I go back and forth. I mean, this is something I've been thinking a lot about is I've been making films. I'm finding film very satisfying in a way that theater, it's a different kind of labor, and I'm really enjoying the visual work. So I don't know. I'm debating where theater lands for me right now. Like I said, sometimes it's so powerful. It can be some of the most extraordinary experiences I've had, both my own work and others, mostly others. But I'm less enamored of it lately, I must say, for myself as an outlet. Yeah, I think I'm maybe just a little like ready for a third act that's a little different.
I wonder, and you alluded to this earlier, in training, in our work, we interact with the greats. We work, Ionesco, Chekhov, Shakespeare, Brecht, Kushner.
A lot of Brecht.
Williams. And I wonder, is that relevant in a time when we are programmed to hold a 12-minute thought until we come to the commercial break?
Right.
And is in the hands of the Academy, does that work resonate with an emerging audience of people who want to have their stories told? I think it can. And I know.
I'm of 2 minds, right? Are you of 2 minds of this, though? Yeah. I'm of 2 minds. One, look what's happening in television right now. Why wouldn't we all want to be taken? That is just the place to tell the stories right now. I'm obsessed with the kind of quality that's happening right now, and innovation and bravery and acting and directing and writing. And I just love it. So there's one, how do you compete with that? But the truth is, there is something about that communal experience of being in the same room with other people and having that energy of the group make the event. And the audience is the key. It's 50% of what happens on stage is the audience.
Right. That's when the play comes together.
Of course, whether it's a performance work, a play, a new play, a musical, whatever it is, if you don't have the audience, and if the audience isn't available and ready to be the viewer you need with the right software to get what you're saying, it's not the same experience.
No.
And film is different because people are watching it individually. And that's why I'm excited. My first film is going to be done in a few weeks, I think, with post-production, which means we'll get to send it out to film festivals. And I'll get to sit in theaters and watch people watch it, because I've been watching it on my little computer screen, so that'll be closer to the theater experience. I think we do want collectivity, to be honest. I do. And I think it scares us right now. So,
well, it scares us because of all that's happening in the world, but I also think 2 interesting things about this time, and I would love your opinion on it. I do think part of the reason why people in the midst of COVID were still coming together, even though we couldn't, was because we need a community. We need to physically interact with other people, breathe air together.
Yes.
And I think it's such a need for us as a survival method, which was counterintuitive to what we needed to do in the time, which was isolate.
Right.
And I also think, I know I'm too old for TikTok,
Me
but
too.
I think there's something fascinating that the world has taken to dance.
Oh, I agree.
I
Okay,
think those
great.
two things, that need for community and that need for physical expression through dance, I think
Yes, sir.
thumbs up the human experience as far as
Let me
I'm.
tell you, my 16-year-old and his friend, my 16-year-old's a musician, a brilliant, wonderful musician. And him and his friends, these wonderful teen friends, go to these concerts, vaccinated concerts, people are masked, but they go to these concerts and they mosh. They just let it all out. It's so beautiful. Yeah, I'm of two minds of it myself, Patrick. I think the reason that got me out of the house and needing to be with others was the George Floyd murder that happened here in Minneapolis and the eruption of the uprising there. I was out on the streets for that, the way so many of us were. And you wouldn't have thought we would. It was a pandemic and it was dangerous, but there was a need, right? To not just watch it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, but to go and be present and have your body on the line and just have a sense of community. George Floyd Square, which is the area where George Floyd was, right where he was killed, has become this unbelievably moving gathering space. It's what humans do. We make community, right? And
Yeah.
it's not enough to just look at it on a TV screen. You got to go and stand there and see and feel and be with the other people that are there. And many people here that live in Minneapolis and have the privilege of doing this just go by every once in a while to feel that liveness of that space, the hope, the despair, the marking of what's missing and what's present in our community right now. And it is extremely powerful. And for me, that's a site of theater. That gathering is a site of theater and more powerful to me than reading a play that was written 100 years ago. That's just me. Now, at the same time, those old plays and the traditions that theater comes out of can still speak to us, and that's what makes them great. They speak through the ages. And what's going to speak through from this time? Maybe it's those TikTok videos. Maybe it's George Floyd Square. And maybe it's the plays that are coming out of this last 5 years, right? Amazing new work happening. So it's not that I'm despairing. It's that I want theater to keep growing up. I want it to be able to be mature as it moves forward and not infantilize us, not be safe all the time. And that's what I think I want. And I think it's happening. I think we're in an amazing moment for theater right now, aren't we? We're in a transitional moment for the arts in general.
Well, the arts are having to sort of relook at, I call it the academy.
Yeah, that's
And
a
I
good word
think
for it.
every discipline, dance has Balanchine and modern dance has Martha Graham and modern art has Jackson Pollock. I think everyone is having to go back and look at the academy and say, what can we keep and what must we get rid of in order to move it forward into more relevance?
Yeah. There's room for it all. It's not, we have a scarcity brain set around theater too, right? We're nonprofit, most of us. It's not about, there's plenty. It's always, how can you cut your budget? You're in competition with others. That's why I get so excited when I see theaters or people or artists lifting up others, the way you do. That's the spirit of generosity that good art comes from, is saying, I tell my artists this all the time that I'm training. I say, look around you. Whose work excites you, thrills you, challenges you, and go and say, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Because I want to hear all about what you do. That's how you build not who can get me ahead, who can help my career, who can network me. It's just less fruitful. So I love what you're doing with this series, which is saying, I want to uplift other people's points of views, and then they get to share in your wisdom as well. And it's this sort of wonderful exchange. I think it's just lovely. And it's an antidote to TikTok, frankly, which is too fast.
But I do think there's something about, and this platform, this show is emerging and developing all the time, but I feel like I do want to create a space where really smart people and people who've achieved as much as you've achieved and people who are just starting in their careers and
Yeah.
people who are confused or lost can come and let's talk about it. Like,
Yeah,
let's just
exactly.
have the conversation. No judgment, no whatever. And that's what I feel like we need right now.
You know, my father passed away this last year, and he was 85. He had the longest running conversation talk show on Manhattan television. It had been a
Wow.
50-year program called Conversations. He interviewed over 4,000 people. So I've been going through his archive and looking at his mission statements and why he did this. And what you just said, he was onto something, that there's something about a conversation which is different than an interview,
Right.
right? A conversation that others get to listen to and have their brains stimulated, and the two people are coming at it collectively to the conversation rather than the expert interviewing the newbie, or either way, whatever. So just that's a nice kismet moment for me.
Lisa, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Funnily enough, Catherine Hahn and I talked about this.
Hmm.
We live in a time when expertise is not valued. We want the fly by night story. We want I just showed up and I knew how to do this thing, which is not real. Can you talk about the importance of expertise and training that's been in your career and how that's supported the work, the revolutionary and fantastic work that you do?
I think that, well, thank you for saying those things. That's incredibly generous to talk about me that way. That's not how I think of myself, but thank you. I would say that craft, right? This notion of craft and training is sometimes pitted against democratic, everybody's an expert on themselves thinking. And I don't think those two things are exclusive. So, for example, I think I inherited the idea that a director is the daddy at the top and everybody else, it's a ladder, right? And I've had to take that notion and do this with it and then make it a circle. So instead of a hierarchy, you take it and you just turn it on its side. And that for me is a better metaphor of what actually happens in a creative room. It's a circle, but in that circle are experts. There is the person who's an expert in sound. There's the actor trained in that skill, but they're all equal. Do you see? And the best rooms for me are the ones where you can't tell whose job is what. They have their job. They're looking at it very carefully, but I bring my designers into the room very early. They're in there from the beginning, really. So someone that walked in from the outside might go, is that the director? And it's my sound designer who's talking to an actor about an idea because they know they have the permission and desire to do that. So does that make sense? But I think what's happened, and I agree, is the internet in all of its horror and glory has given everyone access to sharing their thoughts and sharing their process or whatever it is. And very often it's without any basis in training skill. And also training is flawed. Sometimes people that are trained in ways, whatever they're doing, that are actually problematic and keep them and hold them back. But I agree. I think I'm all for the circle of experts. I am excited by anyone that does what they do really well and with a lot of skill. That's the people I want to work with, especially if they're excited about all the other people in the circle and how they do what they do and respect it. So I work with a lot of hybrid artists for that reason, playwright, actors, and costume designer, lighting designers, people that like to cross boundaries. I will always go for the person as a collaborator who feels that they really have a handle on what they're trying to do and have some kind of skill technique that they've gleaned from the world that they can fall back on and work with. Do you think?
I agree. I think we get into trouble when we look to an athlete to give us medical advice or look.
Absolutely. Yes. Isn't that happening right now?
I don't know. I'm going to talk to my doctor. I mean, if I need to figure out how I'm going to catch a pass and run to the end zone, you're my guy.
Exactly. That's what I mean about the democratization has gotten,
Right.
it's scary in some ways, right? It's
Right.
wonderful because everyone has a platform now. And before, very few people had a platform. But now it's gone in this, it can go in these directions that make it so unwieldy and dangerous. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we need experts. You want to talk to a person who went to school to do that thing when you're going to be having surgery.
We do need experts. And I know you're in the spa world, right?
Yes.
There's got to be a need for experts there, right? You can't just have people wandering in like, I think I'll start a spa. You have to know what you're doing. I'm so jealous, by the way, that you're in the spa industry because it's like my dream to live or be able to go to spas. I think they're brilliant.
You
Fully
will find
jealous.
many similarities between what we do in the theater and what we do in the spa. It's quite
Really?
layered together. Your world making, you're creating. It's all, and I
Yeah,
think
it's all
that's
creative.
people are always surprised when they look at my past and sort of where I am today. And I'm like, but it's all the same
All the
impulse.
same thing. I agree.
Same
Everything I do is the same thing. My
impulse.
mothering, my activism, everything I do comes from really the same place. I don't have compartmentalization about it. And so I understand what you're saying. That same life force that you were putting
Yeah.
out through your work as an actor is just now channeling into this amazing other career. Also, I think we all get to have as many lives as we want. I tell my students that all the time. I'm like, look, there's a million ways to live a life, and you're going to live a few hundred of them.
I think about that because I'm like, when we were in school together, we all had very sort of clear ideas, perhaps, about what we were going to do. And because you're in a conservatory program, there's not much space
Yeah.
for, oh, let me explore this other side of myself.
Especially for the actors, I think.
Yeah, we're really,
We
you're
got to do more of that than you did. Yeah.
right. But I think as I've gotten older, I've come to understand, and life is big. And to your point, you have hundreds of lives. I think one thing this podcast is doing for me is letting me bring all these different lives and experiences
Mm-hmm.
to this moment. And I feel like, oh, wow, this really feels highly integrated and highly familiar, even though, podcast model and all of that is somewhat different.
Oh, it's great.
But it does allow, and I think, and maybe that's the goal that we need more of, is how do we create people to think about themselves as complete whole human beings and not be defined
Yeah.
by this, oh, I'm a this or I'm a that, which is kind of antithetical to expertise, but expertise.
But there can be I studied ballet as a young dancer, like strongly studied ballet. And what you learn is that discipline, that attention to my body on the molecular level, it's so minute, gave me training for the rest of my life, not just in dance. In fact, the least of it is in dance. How I learn things, how I pick up the world, how I go through a struggle and get through the other end because I know that if I practice, I'll get there. That discipline, all that stuff. And it doesn't matter if it's soccer, weaving or writing or cars. And that dedication, that grit, that discipline to be able to go through something and even through the hard parts and figure out what works for you. It can be taught it doesn't matter what form you do it in. I just think it's something everybody eventually needs. But then you can explore. It's like jazz. You learn the notes so you can blow them up.
Right.
And I think that's how I think about theater too. You got to learn the notes, learn all the stuff that's happened, and then you can actually play with it. And then you can take it new places.
I have one last question for you, because you've talked about your kids. I know that you were pregnant when we were in school together. What does motherhood mean to you?
Motherhood's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest thing anyone's ever done. So if they tell you differently, they're lying. It takes your whole spiritual, emotional, and physical self to do it. It's an extreme sport. So, and if you're also an artist at the same time, then if you're being honest, it's an amazing dance back and forth, right? I'm not one of those moms that makes my kids the center of my life. I never did. They were feral. They got to have their own worlds, and they've thanked me for that many times because they weren't helicopter parented, I guess, which was the norm when we were raising our kids. In reaction to our kids being born out of 9/11, well, the whole generation just had a hard time. They inspire me. They infuriate me. I love them. I see myself in them. I learned so much. And one thing I did early on was Volodya and I realized we were making shows and we were teaching, both of us, and what are we going to do with these kids? My mother was around some of the time, but every parent has this issue. So we just started putting the kids in the shows. Daniel became one of my performance art maker partners. We made some really weird pieces together when he was young. And he was a fantastic collaborator. And it was a way for me to they were in the room. They had a whole family of artists loving them and building them up and supporting them. And for me, that just made sense. And because I was under the radar with my work, I was never really, there was no pressure for me to be successful. I wasn't at the big theaters or trying to make it to Broadway or any of that stuff. I was really doing my own work in my own performance and theater circles. So I could do that. I could put the kids in a show and not worry about what people would think. I think mostly, though, they got a lot of aunties and uncles and a lot of good experiences and got to tour and, and neither one of them could care less about theater now. They don't want to do it. They respect us. They're good judges, but they don't have any interest in it. So we did our job well. I tell my students, though, I want to say one last thing about this is for me, and I think you get this, Patrick, a good theater major, right? A person that studies theater when they're young and studies it in college or at some kind of program is honing the exact skill sets that our world needs right now. We need compassion. We need empathy, ability to imagine yourself in someone else's world. We need collaboration. We need non-binary thoughts. And theater and art live in the smudges between boundaries. They live there. We're scientific, but we're improvisational. I'm at a big, huge university, right? It's a research one university with all these med schools, and we have Mayo here and all this stuff. And I still get feedback all the time that our theater students are among the best students on campus because they're questioning everything. They can look you in the eye and have a conversation when everyone else is here. They're in their bodies, they're embodied. If you think about, and spas do that too, right? They get you back into your body.
Absolutely.
We are needing this. And look at the politics, look at everything. It's cut off from empathy. It's cut off from world imagining. I really do think, far from making the entertainment wing, that when you're working with young artists or any artist really, you're training exactly what the world needs. And hopefully they'll know that they're empowered to lead instead of follow trends because they're so smart. Actors are so smart.
Regina Bain said it. Regina Bain said, the artist will lead us out of it.
I agree. If they're fully empowered and get to grow up and be full humans, then they get to do that. And if they're not abused.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
You are amazing. I'm so proud of you, Patrick. I love everything you're doing. And I only wish we ever got a chance to work together. We never did.
Well, listen, life is long.
Life is long. We still have, 300 lives left? So
we have 300 lives to go, so it could happen.
I would love that. Where are you based?
I am in California.
You are, yeah. Well, I come out there all the time because my brother lives there. So next time I'm there, let's have an in-person gathering.
Just to hug you, put my arms around you.
I know, hug and what we talked about, right? The actual sharing the molecules, the sharing of oxygen. It makes a difference. Yeah.
So thank you. And to those of you who are watching and listening, remember, we all have a voice. So use yours wisely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Patrick. Mwah.